Hello, this is Dr. J's Movie Imaginarium, a podcast about movies, movie theory, movie history. I am your host, Dr. J. Steinmetz, assistant professor at Fort Hays State University, and a kind of a movie person, just a little bit. I wrote a book about history and development of the Hollywood movies. I'm interested in film theory, and in this podcast, what we're going to do, again, taking the starting assumption that human consciousness, there's something unique to it, and if human consciousness created the physical universe, then movies are more real than reality. And here we are talking about reality itself, talking about the movies. What movie do I want to talk about today in this episode? Well, in fact, I want to discuss a movie from 1998, directed by Peter Weir, and this movie is The Truman Show, starring Jim Carrey and Laura Linney and Ed Harris. The Truman Show sketched out the future of American culture, not only the rise of a more obsessive reality television, one that gleans and sells authenticated drama out of the debris of everyday life, but also a broader vision of the heightened interplay between the pleasure of voyeurism and the paranoia of being watched. This is a movie that says something about our culture as seemingly obsessed with privacy, our privacy right being one of our most expansive and cherished rights in our world today, a right that many think is under existential threat, our right to privacy. This interplay in the pleasure of voyeurism and the paranoia of being watched is amplified in The Truman Show by an increasingly powerful, centralized, and highly sophisticated media industrial complex. A system that has developed through multiple mediums the ability to simultaneously satiate our scopophilic desires, our pleasure in looking, and trigger our deep fears of being surveilled, scrutinized, and even controlled, scopophobia. The Truman Show marked the threshold into a braver new world, one that infiltrates the real in order to mass produce it. So the Truman Show, in fact, lays some of the imagistic foundations for what now, as we're moving slowly but surely into the mid part of the 21st century, things that define our lives. A media industrial complex that has developed multiple systems and abilities to satiate our desires, but also to sort of scratch at some of the fears of being watched. Is our smart TV listening to everything we say? Is it watching what we do? Well, to what extent are we all in our own little Truman Shows? There are, in fact, two Truman Shows. One is the film, produced at a cost of about $60 million, starring Jim Carrey. The second Truman Show exists in the film's diegetic world itself. The second Truman Show is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week reality television revolution starring Truman Burbank, a man whose whole life is watched by millions around the world. Truman was born and raised in a television program. He knows nothing outside of his master-planned community, Seaside. In this sense, The Truman Show is his only reality. It is authentic. It is self-contained. It is a genuine reality, and the only thing genuine in it is him. It is presumably a hit show precisely because Truman authenticates this carefully choreographed reality. He gives authenticating power to it. His conviction and the veracity of his life experience is the source of the show's power. Without his genuine belief that he lives in a real world, the show would lose its meaning, would lose its luster, would probably not be a television revolution. This, of course, is the symbolic retelling of the individual's existence in postmodern America filled with inauthentic, with kitsch, with that which is not real, right? The fabricated, the artificial, praised and celebrated as early as the 1960s and things like Andy Warhol's pop art, right? That the inauthentic actually has its own artistic appeal to it. We live in a world that is now saturated by these postmodern artifacts, by a post-truth and a post-authentic environment, right? To be ironic in an ironic world and an inauthentic world is, in fact, in many ways, the only ways to navigate the cultural landscape that we live in. Every phase of our lives can be fabricated. It can be rendered artificial. We live from behind a very human mask, And yet conviction dissolves our fears and pretensions, washes away the dirty truth. Moreover, America has become a collection of truly authentic lives that were built on artificial foundations. Our previously authentic culture was the basis of an artificial film and television culture, which has in turn become the basis of our authentic culture. These are the filters of the real that mimic the dramas of the camera reel. Believing doesn't make reality more real, but it does make for a satisfied life experience. For would you rather venture behind reality's curtain, an apotheosis of the real? Or would you prefer life fills with meaning and security? This is the question put to Truman in the film's conclusion, and his answer is to walk out of this world in hopes of experiencing authentic existence. And let's go to a clip of that final scene.
Truman. You can speak. I can hear you.
Who are you?
I am the creator of a television show that gives hope and joy and inspiration to millions.
Then who am I?
You're the star.
Was nothing real?
You were real. It's what made you so good to watch. Listen to me, Truman. There's no more truth out there than there is in the world I created for you. Same lies, the same deceit. But in my world, you have nothing to fear. I know you better than you know yourself.
Never had a camera in my head.
You're afraid. That's why you can't leave. It's okay, Truman. I understand. I have been watching you your whole life. I was watching when you were born. I was watching when you took your first step. I watched you on your first day of school. The episode when you lost your first tooth. You can't leave, Truman.
Please, God.
You belong here
You can do it.
with me. Talk to me. Say something. Well, say something, goddammit. You're on television. You're live to the whole world.
In case I don't see ya. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Yeah.
And he takes his bow and he walks out of the constructed sea world, the world made especially for him. On the fake and the genuine here. All that is fake, or all that surrounds Truman, is entirely fake. He's the only genuine thing in a world of lies. And as his creator, what a moment, by the way, to be faced with the creator, right? To have a conversation with the creator. And as the creator points out, stay, right? Stay in this world, because there is nothing but lies and inauthenticity and fakeness out in the so-called real world, outside the bubble. The only difference is that Truman will be taken care of, right? He has nothing to fear. In this sense, Truman is the embodiment of privilege. Everything is provided for him. He does not need to compete socially or economically. He's provided a very good job. He's provided a wife who stumbles into his life, pretending to have sprained her ankle, right? Everything is provided for Truman in this world. And in this sense, this is a most extreme version of privilege, to be handed an entire world, not just to be handed a good job or a beautiful wife or a family, to be handed an entire world, a whole community of people. So this is this, tension. Are authentic lives compatible with their artificial premise, right? In the film's conclusion, it suggests that we would rather walk into the more real world and all of its contingencies and all of its disappointments and all of its rudeness, and then to remain in a world of comfort and a completely artificial world. But here's the problem. How artificial, or the other word, and the opposite, how authentic is our world that we live in today? Are authentic lives compatible with their artificial premise? Can we be satisfied with prefabricated realities so long as they are sufficiently convincing? Both Truman shows tell us that uncovering reality is the way to fill life with meaning, a hopeful conclusion, perhaps a little too hopeful. I compare this movie in many ways to The Matrix. The Matrix, a film also from the late 1990s with Keanu Reeves, deals with reality, a very constructed reality, and it suggests that, in fact, our world, our real world that we know it, really is just a computer program, an illusion, right? A bit of software trickery that has created a world. There's a moment in this film, however, when one of the individuals in the film decides that he would rather live in the fake because it nonetheless provides a very convincing reality, right? He might rationally and cognitively know that the steak he's eating is not real, but it certainly tastes real. And to taste a real steak is perhaps better than even knowing that the steak is some kind of digital illusion. So can we be satisfied with prefabricated reality so long as they are sufficiently convincing? Both Truman shows tell us that uncovering reality is the way to fill life with meaning, and this is a hopeful conclusion. But the explosion of reality television that follows the Truman Show, and the deeper entrenchment into what philosopher Slavoj Žižek calls the reality of the virtual, are signs that the Truman Show, while brilliant in message, perhaps got the ending wrong. Okay? Perhaps it is the case that the reality of the virtual is the reality of the film world itself, and that Truman, and the optimistic conclusion in which Truman can walk out of this fabricated reality is naive, in the sense that this does not reflect our experience with the so-called real and our experience with digital virtual reality. If we are to take the Truman Show's sketch of American culture at face value and follow its logic to the tragic end, then we must recognize that a revelation of reality is humanity's greatest illusion, the search for reality itself. When Truman leaves the world of the Truman Show, he will presumably enter our world a man now free to consume and watch with pleasure. We will make new television shows, and Truman will no doubt enjoy some of them. Indeed, the last shot of the Truman Show is the affirmation of continuance. Two men turn the channel to something else, floating away from the Truman obsession toward uncharted TV waters. The film's omnipresent question is, how will it end? But perhaps even more important to ask is, once it ends, has anything really changed? Central to this analysis should be a larger discussion of American consumer patterns and contemporary media, the shopping mall as an emblem of reinforcing capitalist society, and the dialectics of scapophilia, that is, a pleasure in looking, and scapophobia, that is, a fear of being looked at. These are all things that I think the Truman Show suggests. I will also say that The Truman Show has aged remarkably well. Movies age like fine wines. The great movies age like fine wines. And The Truman Show has aged very well. It is also incredibly prescient. It is a movie that we do not have a Truman Show 24 hours, 7 day a week, but we have, after the release of this film in the subsequent years, gone through a real reality TV show revolution. Okay, reality TV is now one of the fixtures and pillars of our visual entertainment. Let me go back a little bit to that question, the omnipresent question in the film, how will it end? This is a question that is found on the pin of the sweater of this woman who Truman is in love with and has been forcibly removed from the show. A woman that sort of, centers his obsession and his suspicion that this world is actually fake, that there's some kind of conspiracy theory going on. Well, she's wearing a pin that says, how will it end? There's no real deep discussion of this question in the film, but I think it's really interesting to think about the meaning of this question for the film and especially its tension between realness and artificiality. One of the ways of understanding this question, how will it end, is perhaps it is asking us, how will the fiction end and the real begin? Okay? This is also a question that seems central to the anti-Truman Show movement within the film, a movement that essentially sees a deep, deep violation of privacy of Truman Burbank. Let us not forget here that that Truman is the first child in the film. Truman is the first child legally adopted by a corporation, owned by a human being, owned by a business. Now, setting aside some very clear and direct violations of our U.S. Constitution, we can assume that this world is presenting us with a human being that essentially is propertied, right? A human being that is propertied, owned by a corporation. In fact, it is a 24-hour commercial-free television programming because it is paid entirely by advertising within the film. I'll mention here that Truman's wife in particular seems to be the most shameless promoter of consumerism throughout the film. She, played by Laura Linney, has all of these very hilarious lines of pitching various different consumer products throughout the TV show. So how will it end? How is it going to end? Well, The Truman Show, as it's pointed out very early on in the movie, is for a culture bored with actors, bored with special effects, right, of the kind of classic Hollywood film. Instead, Truman Show presents us with the idea that genuine life is truly better entertainment. We can be entertained by genuine life, and there is something authentic that we crave. Perhaps we crave this authenticity because our real world really is filled with so many inauthentic artifacts and inauthentic ways of living. It's interesting also to look at some of the political consequences or the political meaning that can be gleaned from this film. Think about the relationship between Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. I was recently reading an op-ed article by a television critic on how to understand Trump through the reality TV lens, right? Now, much similarity or comparison has been made between Reagan and Trump because they were both entertainment personalities, right? They were both in some ways, Reagan wasn't quite a star, but he was just a kind of a contract actor in the classic Hollywood era. But they were both certainly well-known entertainers and cultural personalities in their own right before they entered politics. But there's a key distinction here, a really important and meaningful one. Trump's reality TV identity is not acting. It is not what actors do, right? Instead, being on reality TV is simply being a bigger you. It's not acting at all. Traditionally, what an actor does is to identify with a degree of authenticity and force, to identify a new character entirely different from themselves, to create and construct a character, right? And the construction of a character and the identity of a character for a professional actor is a lot about empathy, right? It's empathizing with that particular character's motivations. Those are not necessarily your motivations, right? Even so-called method acting, where we take our own personal life experiences and we transpose them into an actor's world in order to affect some kind of emotional response, right? An ability to trigger crying by imagining some tragic moment in your own life and then connecting it to the character that you're playing. Even that requires this sort of like distance in a sense, right? It's not just our personal characteristics. We're not just genuinely carrying through our real and personal life. We're taking genuine moments and sort of transplanting them into this character that we are constructing. So reality TV identity is not acting. It's being a bigger you, right? In fact, I find a more apt comparison, not comparing Donald Trump to Ronald Reagan, but comparing Donald Trump to Truman Burbank. Consider, right? Trump often considers himself encased in an artificial world, increasingly belligerent and lashing out at rules and norms that surround him, right? The institutions are filled with fakery, fake news, right? The swamp people, right, that are out to get him. There are many reports in the White House that he is deeply concerned about people not bending to his will, people doing the opposite of what he wants. He was just recently mentioned with regards to the new Ukraine controversies that the whistleblower is effectively a spy, people watching him, people constructing an artificial world around him. Okay? The only thing authentic is, for Trump himself. On the Trump impeachment drama, right? This, in fact, is high-level drama. This is high-level spectacle, and it draws crucial attention. And one thing that we know about Trump is that Trump really does like attention, craves attention, desires it a great deal. The ratings, the camera eye, right? The audience. These things to a certain extent are important to all politicians, but I think Trump is just is a little bit more committed to this idea of politics as drama and spectacle and something to be watched, and that the winners are those who can drive the ratings. Well, the Trump impeachment drama will certainly draw attention. It will certainly draw attention to him and ensure that he is in the headlines. But this is an existential crisis and an existential threat to the show, to the Trump presidency show, which is a reality TV show. There was another report that I read recently that Trump actually instructs his staff early part of the day in the morning to think of each day like an episode. And how do we win? How do we show that we're winning? How do we show the heroes overcoming the bad guys? In every episode, Tuesday is another episode, and Wednesday is another episode in the Trump White House. Well, we can show drama. We can show heroic acts from Trump's perspective. But this is also an existential crisis to the show itself. Impeachment might come with, it's obviously a low likelihood, but it could potentially come with conviction and removal from office, right? Well, similarly, Truman Burbank and The Truman Show. Truman provides drama with his obsession with Fiji and with the woman of his dreams. And these certainly drive ratings and interest, right? At one point, somebody watching, two women who are watching in a bar, one of them turns to the other and says, they got rid of her, meaning the woman of Truman's dreams, but they couldn't erase the memory of her, right? So there's much interest and drama and excitement and attention surrounding not just Truman and his everyday life, but some of this drama that he provides, some of this undercurrent of existential dread that he has, that the meaning of his life is not fully in his control, that he's wandering aimlessly in this town, not fulfilling his true purpose or his true dreams. And so his obsession with Fiji and his obsession with this woman could drive ratings, but it threatens the entire existence of the show. The show is under existential threat, similarly to a Trump presidency and the prospects of impeachment. Let me talk about conspiracy theory and The Truman Show as well. Some of the details of conspiracy. For example, when his father comes back, he sees his father dressed as a homeless person. He says to his mother, "It was Dad, dressed as a homeless man." Right? "Everyone knows everything you do. They are all pretending," says the woman of his dreams. Her father comes down to the beach and says now she's a schizophrenic. She brings all her men down here, right? But her words sort of stick in Truman's head, right? It's hard to tell. They look like regular people, but everything knows everything you do. You've been set up for something. Everything can and is conspired against Truman. There are dense webs of control and manipulation that determine every instance of our lives. In this is a different kind of scopophilia, actually. Scopophilia being pleasure in looking. This is a pleasure in being the absolute center of the universe's attention, right? The absolute center of attention. And this brings us back, I think, to Trump. And here's a really crucial question. Who among us, think to yourself, would you accept this kind of conspiratorial control over every aspect of your life in exchange for all that attention? Right? In exchange for being a TV star around the world? Would you willingly submit to an artificial existence? I suspect that many of you would not. I suspect that most of us ordinary people would not. But I could be mistaken. Maybe if we were given a genuine opportunity to do so, we might take it, right? This kind of conspiratorial paranoia comes out very strongly in The Truman Show, and Truman Burbank, after a while, becomes extremely paranoid and erratic. The scene where his wife, Meryl, is in the car, and Crazy Truman is sort of driving around. First, he identifies the patterns of the people behind him, a lady in a red bike, a man with flowers, a Volkswagen with a dent, right? And then sort of erratically drives around town with little rational or logical choices about the decisions that he's making. This suggests that with paranoia comes other erraticisms, comes a desire to act unpredictably, right? Paranoia can drive a kind of unpredictability of our lives, right? Let me talk about another concept here very quickly, and that's solipsism. Solipsism is the idea that you are the only real and genuine thing in the universe. This is the downside, the negative aspect of The Truman Show. Not that you are unwittingly being controlled by puppet masters who are creating an artificial existence, but that from your own psychological and conscious viewpoint, you believe that you are in a Truman Show that is either constructed by you or constructed by forces that you are not aware of, but that essentially you're the only real conscious being, right? This is one of the tantalizing, maybe not so tantalizing, but almost a magnetic nightmare that we are all potentially faced with going down this path for one specific reason. And that is because you have never experienced consciousness outside of your own consciousness. You can never be entirely sure whether or not there are other consciousnesses out there. The only one you can be certain of is yourself. Everything in your life's experience has you at the very center of the universe. You are at the very center of everything that has happened to you. The whole of the world has either happened in front of you, or to the right of you, or to the left of you, or behind you. You're in the center. And so solipsism is, in some ways, our kind of original narcissism, right? We are all sort of born narcissistic. We are born sort of trapped, as David Foster Wallace calls it, trapped in our skull-sized kingdoms, alone at the center of the universe. The Truman Show suggests, I think, some of the ways in which human beings experience this world trapped in a kind of solipsistic loop of our own consciousness. It also, I think, is one of the reasons why we have a genuine Truman Show syndrome in our world. It is, in fact, a syndrome identified by psychiatric professionals. It's called the Truman Syndrome, right? The Truman Syndrome are for those there are people around our world today who walk around convinced that they are living in a giant reality TV show set, that everybody they encounter is fake, is acting, that they're the only genuine thing. This is sort of the paranoia of solipsism, right? Being trapped in this place. These are all great dangers. They're great dangers not just for a democracy, but great dangers for the meaning of humanity, meaning of human life, and our community. It is important for us to see something of ourselves in the other. It is important for us to recognize, empathize, and find some basis of commonality with other human beings. Right? In our increasingly digital world, I talked about the crisis of materialism in our last episode last week. In our increasingly digital world, we are increasingly confronted with everyday digital inauthenticity and a distance from other flesh and blood human beings. To be in the same room with another human being so that you can read the subtle cues of facial expression, body language, right, is very, very important. Building the connections and bridges between individual human beings, which is what we call humankind. Humankind are the connections, the social glue, the fabric that keeps us together, that connects us together. And that is vitally important and crucial for the furtherance of the human species, for the development of human culture and human societies. The Truman Show reveals a little bit of these dangers and reveals, I think, some of the ways that we may be headed toward these paths of inauthenticity, but even our most inauthentic mediums like motion pictures, right? The art of lies, the lies of the picture moving, the lies of a world constructed, the lives of authentic and genuine individuals in this world. These are lies that tell the truth, and they tell the truth about us. This is Dr. J, Movie Imaginarium. Thank you for listening. Next week, we'll have a new movie, and we'll talk about new things. Take care.